let's get started.
And it seems to be going well so far.
Yeah, it's been really good. I'm really happy with how it's how it's panned out. A lot of interaction, a lot of people taking part in stuff. So yeah, it's good. It's getting a lot of traction and a lot of interest from people. So
it's been a long week. So Jamie, I imagine it's been a very long week for you.
Oh mate, yeah, it is. Who decided that it should be a 7-day week too? It's like Friday, and I've got 2 more days of doing these. This is day 5 already. So yeah, it's felt long week, but we knew it. We always knew it would be. So we kind of tried to prepare for it and block off everything else, and fingers crossed, don't jinx it now, but so far our internet connection is held up and has managed to host all of these things just fine. There's only one tiny bit where there's a glitch and it kicked people out of the coffee shops, but yeah, it's been okay. So everything's working, it's all good. Lots of excited people who are taking part, and yeah, we I don't know if you saw it, Callum, but there's been 1,300 people register for the festival in total. Crazy numbers. Really
mad.
Great. Yeah, really amazing. So
it's great because I think some people that wouldn't have been able to access this had it been, like the classic in-person kind of stuff, it's actually more widely available, especially if you're looking at societies or universities or students who are like Scotland, Northern Ireland, arse end of Wales. Like it's kind of much easier to be like, oh sweet, I can come to as much of this as I want.
And we've noticed so many more SU staff members who obviously, like for RAG in particular, like it's obviously like a fifth of their job to deal with it, and actually they know be able to have the budget to go to conference, and actually so many of them like been joining sessions, which has been something we didn't really expect, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think this has kind of opened up a world for like everybody of like, how can we use the virtual world a lot more going forward? Like, can we like stream them? Can we record all the sessions and put them up? Because if it gets that wider audience, then great.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is it's definitely much more accessible to people, and I know that we're in the tech industry, in the game. We've got a speaker actually on Sunday. He works in the gaming industry, and in their world, all of their live events for years they've streamed online too, and you can buy a digital ticket, which is way cheap versus being there in person, and it means that their message gets out like so much wider to people all around the world. I think having done this now, that kind of thing feels achievable. So even if you do bring people into the same room, there's no reason why you can't also be online.
Yeah, it's also made this sort of like even just virtual meetings like a lot more, like before you'd be like, oh no, like we have to meet in person, whereas now you're like, well, why? Like this is normal now.
All this money we wasted on train tickets.
Yeah. No, but it is much better. But I have to say, I'm looking forward to like being able to go back to the office and have like human interaction, because you forget how much you like bounce off people, and like how much quicker everything is when you're like, I'll just ask you rather than email or like call you or wait until you're free. Like it is nice just to be able to have that sort of interaction as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah,
we'll have to like Hannah Montana style and best of both worlds this thing once we go back to normal.
Yeah,
cool. Right, are we ready?
Yeah, go on then.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Here we go. I can see a few people joining now.
Fabulous.
Hi everyone joining the session at the moment. We'll give it a few minutes for people to just make their way in. But as you're joining, what would be really useful for the session is if in the chat function, if you could just introduce yourself. So just let us know your name, your university, what group you're from, just so we've got an idea of who we're chatting to. And that chat function will be open throughout the entire session. If you've got anything you want to raise or any issues at all. Yeah, don't be shy. Pop yourself a quick message just to introduce yourself in the chat function for us. There we go. I can see a few people have braved it and got in there early. Staffordshire University, Loughborough, Bath Spa, Harriet Watt. Lots of people here to see you, Jenny.
Hi.
Fab. So it's 2 minutes past. So I'm sure we'll have more people joining. But I will introduce our session. So yeah, hi everyone, and thank you very much for coming along to the how to stand out to employers session, presented in association with the National Student Fundraising Association. My name's Callum, and I am your call host today. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded, so if you are uncomfortable with potentially being in the recording, then you can always access it at a later date when that's released. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce Jenny Robinson. Jenny is the Senior Fundraising Manager at Meningitis Research Foundation. She started out fundraising at RAG at University of Birmingham Carnival RAG, and has since moved her way up through Meningitis Research Foundation. So she's got lots of tips for how to turn that experience into a job. As I said, if you can introduce yourself using the chat function, and if you do have any questions throughout, there's a Q&A button at the bottom on the kind of the toolbar as well. So do put any questions you've got in there, and you can upvote questions on there as well. So if there's anything you want to particularly see answered, then please upvote them. We'll try and field some questions to Jenny throughout, but we'll have a bit of time at the end for any generic questions as well. As with all the sessions this week, you'll be able to carry on the conversation in the coffee shop afterwards. So hopefully you're going to find the session really useful, and I'll hand over to Jenny now to let us begin.
Fab, thanks Callum. Fab to see so many people here, although it feels very unfair that I can't actually see you. We'll just crack on. So first of all, I thought it might be useful to actually go through and let you know who I am and why you should listen to me about anything to do with employability. What do I know? So I started off as a fresher. I went to an info meeting about the Kilimanjaro trek, which I had no idea about. Got dragged along by a friend, ended up doing that and had a fantastic time. I then decided that, well, this charity thing sounds quite good. I'll do that while I'm at uni, and I joined Carnival RAG at the University of Birmingham and became a committee member for raids. I then decided I liked it so much that I was going to go into charity as a career. This session will be about, I'll be using the sort of charity sector as an example, but you can use the top tips to go into any sector that you want to. But I decided I want to go into charity. So I ended up applying for a few jobs, got rejected quite hard, and decided that I needed some feedback because I was obviously doing something wrong. And that's when they informed me that I needed a bit more office experience. So I decided to go and do that, did 3 internships in some different charities, then finally got a job as a student fundraiser at Meningitis Research Foundation. And I've now been there for 5 years, working through different roles. And I'm now the events and community manager. So I manage all of the events we do, from London Marathon to student challenges like Kilimanjaro, all the way to community. So I've been a manager for about 2.5, 3 years. So I've interviewed plenty of people and done a few applications myself. So hopefully the tips I give you should be useful. So where do you start when looking at jobs, about what role you want to go into? Where do you want to start? So these are my basics. Firstly, keep a record of your achievements. So it doesn't matter whether you're in first year, third year, postgrad, having a little Google Doc, a notepad, somewhere that you can just pop down all those achievements that you've done are really, really useful. I continue to do that now. So each year I have an appraisal within my job and I have to think about what I've done in the past year, and I literally cannot remember. And luckily I've noted things down as I've gone along. So that will be really useful for you. So open a Google Doc and put down some of those key things that you've achieved, and they can be within RAG, they can be within your degree, they could be a different society, or they could be something completely external, potentially something that you've even done within lockdown. Put together a basic CV. So hopefully most of you will have one already, but if you don't, it's really useful just to have one in your back pocket. There's plenty of templates online, so just grab one online, put something together, and make sure that you're updating this every 6 months so that you can add new skills on there, or change examples or change achievements if you feel that you've got something that you're more proud of. Put a list of competency examples together. So for lots of applications that you're going to get, and potentially for interview questions, you're going to be asked competency-based questions. So do you have this skill, and tell me an example of it. So putting a list together of these already will be really useful, so you can kind of drop and drag and copy and paste into those applications, and so that in the back of your mind for interviews, you've already got an example of when you worked really well in a team, or when you're a great communicator. So that's something that you can put together, and again, you can keep updating that as you go along, but it's a really nice sort of background research for your own applications. Most of you probably will, but if you don't already have a LinkedIn account, really, like, you should create one. This is the new way of communicating. I was a little bit late to the game on this one as well, but get a LinkedIn account, get it set up, and make sure that you populate it. So put in those skills, make sure you've got pictures, all the rest of it, and you can use that. You can find jobs. There is a job section on LinkedIn which is really useful, and you can speak to people in the same sector. You can find out what's going on, and you get a little bit of a sort of insight into what's going on in the area that you want to go in. And then finally, get someone to check over all of the things that you've done. So your CV, the competency skills, and your LinkedIn account. Get someone to have a look over it. Does it look good? Does it make sense? Does it read correctly? So that before you've even started applying or looking at jobs, you've got the basics there set, you've got your tools ready to start going. So now you've decided, now you've got your basics, you want to start looking at roles and decide what's right for you. I know that when you leave university, and especially at the moment, it's a really strange time. It's quite daunting about looking at things and going, what do I want to do? So number one, have a look at job applications and actually just go on and look at what skills and experience you need for those particular jobs, so that you get a good idea of what the job is and what you're going to be required to do. And also you can identify what skills you do have and what skills you don't. Now, for some roles, you might go, actually, I can upskill myself, get the rest of the sort of skills and experience I need to be sailing through these job applications. And for other jobs you look at, you might go, that doesn't interest me at all. So hopefully that should narrow down the scale for you. Secondly, if you're looking at a job and you go, I really want to do this like I did with the student role, but you don't have X experience, internships and volunteering are a great way that you can gain this. So I'd suggest that charities are a great one to start with, especially sort of medium-sized charities, who at the moment could definitely do with extra help, and lots of it can be done digitally. So local charities would be my suggestion for you to get in touch with, and ask them if you can support them. If you are thinking about internships or volunteering, the NAS for Facebook page is a great place for finding out what internships are available, but you can suggest volunteering to an organisation. What I would suggest that you do is go forth and say, this is what I can do. I'm the social media officer for my society, and so I've got great experience in this, and I could help out with supporting your social media, and these are the skills that I would like to gain, because you don't want to just go there and use all the skills you've got and not upskill yourself for the missing skills that you're missing. Then also there are free online courses. So the Open University is absolutely fantastic for free courses, and it's a great way for you to add extra bits and bobs to your CV. It also means that you can have a little bit of a taster at different types of careers, different types of roles, and it can also give you an indication of whether you like them or not. The same with experience. I did an internship that I really didn't like, and so I decided to not go down that road with fundraising and to go down the events road instead. So these things, although they might not end up being a necessarily positive experience of being like, I found my calling, it can give you a good direction of, actually, I need to work with people, or I actually just want to work on my own. And then finally, use your LinkedIn account. So you've got it set up now, it's got all the basics. Reach out to people who are in the role that you want to be doing now, in the role that you want to be doing in maybe 3, 5, 10 years, find out how they got into it. Do they enjoy it? What's their day-to-day role like? This will give you a really good idea of what the role looks like, whether you actually want to do it, whether it sounds fun for you. There's one thing that it looks like on paper, but it's very different to what you can actually be doing day to day. So once you've got the role together, it's now time to look at getting the application done. So basics, check your spelling grammar. Some of these things might sound to you like I'm just teaching you how to suck eggs and you should know this. However, I've seen a lot of applications that have done several of these things wrong. And so I thought I might as well tell everyone, and then you have that basic level. Check your spelling and grammar, super easy to do. Use Grammarly, use the Word one, anything, that's absolutely fine. I would suggest that if you're going to be using Word, that most people will just have the spelling and grammar on the US setting. So I know that if I see organisation with a Z in it, that you've not checked your application properly. So just double check on that, because employers will look for that kind of thing. Number 2, you think this would also be very obvious. Complete every question. Actually fill out those boxes. Because on the application, we want to know as much about you as possible. If you don't fill it out, one, it says to me that you're not interested in the role. You're actually just filling the application out because you just want to put something out there and see what happens. But 2, the more information I know about you, the better idea I'm going to get. Would you fit in the team? Would you fit for this role? Would this work for you? So make sure that you complete every question. Number 3, don't lie. Just don't lie, don't do it. I don't know why people do it. I've had people who've claimed that they've done events, that they have, had huge successes, and then they get through to an interview and I ask them about it and it's very apparent that it's a lie. 1, it's extremely awkward in the interview, but 2, it will get you absolutely nowhere. Just talk about what you've done. You'll have all done enough stuff that you can write about, that you don't need to invent things. Number 4, make sure that you tailor it. So I talked about having in the basics, having those competencies, those skills, those examples. That's great because you can copy and paste them in, but then make sure that you tailor it. Don't just whack them in because it's very obvious. As soon as I get an application that's copied and pasted, I know it. I've even seen applications that have got different company names in that people have forgotten to take out, or different job titles, and that instantly for me says you're not actually interested in this role. You're just putting out applications, which you might be, but you don't want the person reading the application to know that. Number 5, avoid abbreviations. So RAG is within this world, everybody knows what it means, but for an external employer, for other charities, they might not have a clue what that is. And so you want to make sure that you're being very clear and that you're getting the point across that you want to make. So just avoid abbreviations in general. And number 6, read it through. Just read it through, and get someone else to read it through as well, because if it doesn't make sense to them, then it won't make sense to the person that's reading it and judging your application. So these are some classic examples of people who decided not to check their CVs properly. So we've got someone who decided that they provided snakes and lunch for kids. And we've also got this person, Vanessa, who decided that she didn't check her emails and actually sent a picture of Nick Cage instead of her resume and cover letter. Very easily done. My tip would be write the email, put the attachment on before you put the email address in, so that you cannot click the send button until you're absolutely ready and you won't end up with something like this. Right, application. So this is how you're going to make your application stand out. You've got the basics, you've done the spelling checks, you've tailored it. So number 1 is keeping it relevant to the role. So make sure that if you are going to put in some of those skills that you've got, if the role is looking for a team player, then make sure that you just put your team player skills in and not your leadership skills, because they're looking for a team player rather than a leader. Number 2, reflecting the company's values. So all companies will have values. They will be somewhere in their sort of about us page on the website. And that, to me, when I read an application, if I see that somebody's put our values into their application, 1, I know they've gone on our website and they've done their research, so they're obviously interested. But 2, it shows me that they're going to fit in with the team here. They're going to fit in with the company. So if you can do that, feel just one or two. You don't have to do every single one, because you don't want your application to be 10 pages long, but if just a few bits, really useful. 3, utilize the tell me more section. It'll usually be towards the end of the application, but it'll sort of say something about, why do you think you're suitable for this role? This is the section that I, as an interviewer, care about when I'm shortlisting. So about a page and a half is about the right amount to be writing. It's enough that you can give me a good amount of information, but you're concise and you're not waffling. I don't have to read 5 pages to know how suitable you are. It's in here that you're going to want to put all the examples of all the skills match up with the skills that we're looking for in this role, that you've got the experience. That's where you're going to want to put that. And number 4, you're going to want to give examples. So if you're saying, I'm a great fundraiser, give me an example to show me. So there's nothing worse than seeing an application that said, oh, I put on a fashion show and it was really successful and all the money went to charity. What type of fashion show are we talking about? Were there 10 people and it made £100? Or was it a 300-person event that made £10,000? Because those two events are very different. They show me very different skills. So make sure that if you are going to go down the example route, make sure that you put in some details that give your employer an idea of what scale you did that example to.
Jenny, we've had a few questions come in.
Yes.
Got a few for the end, but there's one I want to just bring up now that's just come in. I'm not sure it's been submitted anonymously, but they've asked, what do you think the most important what do you think are the most important soft skills students should be putting on their CV?
So for me, team player is an absolute must have. I want to see somebody who's going to be a good communicator as well. So communication, especially at this point in time where everything's done digitally and remotely, it's really useful that you're going to be a good communicator. Someone who's organized and time management, they're really useful, because I need to know that if I'm going to give you a task and I'll give you a list of 10 tasks, that you'll be able to organize that, do it in the right amount of time and prioritize. So those are my 3 that I would say that in every application you should be putting those 3 ones in there. Also, anything around sort of like a self-motivator, someone who's got a bit of get up and go in them, that's great. And for all those, you want to have an example of, this is when I've shown that I've done that. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, me again at the end.
Fab, thanks, Jenny. So we've got a few more, but I'll save the rest for the end at the moment. So back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. So if you send your application out and you're unsuccessful, make sure that you ask for feedback, because that's going to be really useful to you to make sure that future applications you're sending out, you're not doing the same mistake. And hopefully your employer that you've applied to will be honest with you. So for people who've put spelling mistakes in and that kind of thing, I will say in my feedback, I'll say there were a few spelling mistakes, you obviously didn't check this, there was another company name, expand on your examples, and that's all really useful feedback for you. So keeping it relevant, so lots of applications will ask things like, what are your hobbies and interests, which sounds a little bit strange, but the whole process is about finding out who works. So here I've put, I enjoy playing netball and going to films. I don't at all, but there you go. But what you'd want to see is something like the second paragraph, which says, I'm a member of a local netball team. Since joining last year, it's really helped to develop my teamwork skills, as well as being able to communicate under pressure. That shows me that you've got those skills, you've gained that's going to be useful to me, that your hobbies are actually useful. Also in the sort of hobbies section, just as an extra, if you've got any skills like Photoshop or in design or social media, things that might not be within the role description, it might be that they might be useful elsewhere in the company. So those kind of skills and hobbies add in, but if it is just a general hobby, see if you can bring it back to the skills that the employer is looking for. Values. So one of the values at our charity is that we pursue our goals with determination. So this is how you can try and fit in those values into that application. So the first bit is, I completed my degree whilst having a part-time job at a bar and being part of the Raising and Giving Society. So most people here will probably have done that at some point through their university career. And so here you could put, I share similar values with Meningitis Research Foundation as I also pursue my goals with determination. I held a part-time job, was a key committee member for the Raising and Giving Society, all whilst pursuing and completing my philosophy degree. That to me says, I've been on your website, I know what your values are, I have them as well, and this is how I'm going to fit into your organisation. So that should be quite a useful one. You don't have to put loads of these in, but if you drop, 2, 3 values in there, it shows me that you've married that up and that you're going to mirror our organisation. Okay, tell me more. So on the sort of giving examples in the section where you can say why you're suited to the role, it's about expanding on that. You don't have to give me an absolute pages and pages of information, but just some examples. So I was a social media officer for the Raising and Giving Society and produced the content for the RAG Facebook page. That's great, but it doesn't give me any actual content. It doesn't give me any examples. So I held the social media officer role for the Raising and Giving Society for a year. In that year, I produced all the page content, which included 3 regular posts per week. From these regular posts, we saw an increase of 50% reach and 60% increase in engagement over the year. That's really useful as an employer to go, oh, okay, they've done this and these are some achievements that they've done, and actually they know what they're talking about. That's great. They've come in, they've made an improvement. That to me gives me that bit more information. It's not a huge amount more text wise, but content wise, that's absolutely huge. So make sure that you're putting in those examples and pulling out the experience that you actually have on that one. So I'm now going to go through a little bit how you can use your RAG experience, and I'm going to give you guys probably about 5 minutes to pull through some of this into your own, just scribble it down, write it in a Google Doc or something like that, so you can have a little bit of a start on this, and then I'll carry on after that. So RAG experience, hopefully most of you are in a Raising and Giving Society. If you're not, if you're just doing in a general society, then feel free to use this as well. I'm sure that you'll have had similar experiences. So first one is extract the skills from your particular role. So you want to make sure that potentially just pick 5 that you've gained from it, whether it's communication, organisation, time management, whether it's innovation. It could be anything depending on what your role is. So make sure that you pull those skills out of that role, and so that you've got an example for them as well. So if you say, oh well, when I was at RAG, I was, the events coordinator and I was very innovative. Well, how were you innovative? I've got no idea. Oh, I was innovative because I came up with a new event concept, and we did first dates for the first time ever, and it was a huge success. Just pull out those skills and give yourself a 1-line example of how you've got those, because that'll be really useful for applications and within the interview. 2, highlight a team working example from an event. So most of you will have volunteered for something, maybe run an event yourself, maybe done a teamwork exercise, it might have been a freshers fair. Whatever it is, pull out a team working example, because you'll more than likely be asked in the interview, oh, so you say you're a team player, but can you give me an example of when you've worked well in a team? That's the perfect thing to go, yep, of course I have this great example. So that's number 2. Number 3, how did something go wrong and how did you fix it? This is an absolutely standard interview question. In the workplace, things go wrong, events get cancelled, postponed, somebody drops out, something happens. and you need to be able to problem solve. So your employer's going to want to know, how can you do that? And that's for any role, doesn't have to be events, can be anything. So get an example of when something went wrong and how you went about fixing it, and make sure that you've got that as a prepared example, because that's always gets asked. What you will also probably asked is, okay, if you could go back, how would you do things differently? So have a think about that as well. Would you do things exactly the same? That's great. Usually the best examples that we hear are where someone did something, but when now they look back, they think, actually, I could have handled that differently. I could have spoken to that person earlier before this, issue got out of hand, or I could have been a lot calmer in the situation. And so I've learned and I've grown. That's really useful. We're not looking for the person to be absolutely perfect on day one. We're looking for someone who's able to grow. So have a think about that. I'm sure that anyone who's been in a RAG will have had something that has gone very wrong very quickly, and I'm sure that you will have fixed it. And then number 4, some of your main achievements. What are some of the things that you've achieved that you're proud of? Did you put on, the best event? Did you recruit the most people? Did you raise the most money? Was it just that everything fell apart and you managed to put something back together at the last minute? And so having those kind of experiences and having those kind of examples just handy, potentially on your competency sort of basics, will be really useful to use that RAG experience for examples. As an employer, having a degree is fantastic, great, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for someone who's got skills and who's had experience, and the RAG is the best place possible. You get such a breadth of experience, all whilst doing something for charity, which people love. Philanthropy is key, especially if you're not even going into charity. To say this to another organisation, if you're going to accountancy or teaching or anything else, they'll look at this in a really positive light. So maybe this is a little foolish because there are about 60 of you on this call, but I'm going to offer you guys my services, and I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes now just to start writing down some of these examples, some of the skills from your role, some of the working examples in a team when something went wrong. And if you email me before the end of Sunday this weekend with what your examples are, I'm happy to give you a little bit of feedback. I can give you my email address at the end, but I'll just give you a few minutes to scribble a few notes down, and then hopefully I don't have 60 emails, but if you'd like to, I'm happy to give you some support and to give you some advice. So I'll let you jot something down now.
In the meantime, Jenny, we've had a few questions come in, and I know you're going to come on to interviews, I believe, in the next couple of slides. So I'll leave those questions for the end.
Yeah.
But there's a few questions that people are saying about some stuff you mentioned already. So I guess whilst people are jotting down the examples, we can kind of talk in the background about these.
Yeah, perfect.
So Elena has asked whether you know of any resources or tips you'd recommend when setting up a LinkedIn profile.
So my top tips would be that before you start adding anybody, make sure that you go on and you complete. There's a great sort of how good is your profile little walkthrough that LinkedIn already have. So just follow that and make sure that you've sort of ticked all of those boxes. Get some of your friends on there first and upskill each other, because you can do that. Get all that done first, so you've got a really nice basis before you then go out. There's also lots and lots of articles of how to make my LinkedIn better, so feel free to just have a little Google of those. But yeah, it would be get your LinkedIn looking as good as possible, and then get your friends to go in and add the skills for you and do it for them as well. Let's be fair.
Fantastic. I think just to add to that as well, Elena, obviously lots of people are on LinkedIn. So if you know what role you're looking for, have a look at other people who are already in that role. Look at what their LinkedIn profiles look like, and kind of get your feel for the kind of stuff that you can include on that as well. Wonderful. We've had another question come in. So someone has asked, I think you mentioned earlier that when you were in RAG, you work specifically in raids.
Yeah.
Were you able to use this to help you gain employment, and if so, how?
Yeah, so I used basically what the screen has now is I used that to help me with I extracted my skills from that. So I said that I was I had to like liaise with the charity partner, and I had to communicate both with them and with the rest of the committee and with the participants. I had to make sure that I was organised by ensuring that I had the permits on time, that I sorted out the transport and the location. I had a few team working examples of where I used my committee to help recruit more people. There's definitely a few examples that I used about when things went a little bit wrong, but I managed to fix them. And then I used it as one of my achievements of, at that point, it was like the biggest poppy collection that we'd ever done as a society. So you don't have to be, I was the president of RAG to necessarily have, okay, well, they'll definitely get a job because they'll be amazing. It's about using the skills that you gained in your position to really highlight how good you are at those skills.
Fantastic. And I think probably time for one more before we move on, whilst everyone's working away. Fantastic. So Izzy has asked, when I've applied and been unsuccessful for a job, the company will say they will not provide feedback. Would you still say I should ask again?
Yeah, why not? I don't think you can lose anything. I think it's about how you frame it. If you go back and say, I appreciate that you don't give feedback, but I was really disappointed as I was really interested in working with this company, and I'd like to know that, how I can improve in case another role becomes available in the future. I know that some companies are just really big and they don't really care because they have hundreds of applications. But if it's somewhere a little bit smaller, they might see that and go, actually, it's only one person. I'll give them the feedback. I don't think it will be a detriment. I think if you go back and are rude about it, then might stand against you. But saying, I really would like to work for this company, even if it's not true, it's just it gives people a bit of an ego boost, and they always love that.
Fantastic. So we've got a few more questions, but we'll come on to those ones at the end. So yeah, I've hand it back over to you if you're ready to.
Fab. I shall move on. So these are the last few slides, so I'll not be keeping you too long on a Friday afternoon. So before the interview, read up on the company. So make sure that you've done your background research. Go onto their website, go into the About Us section, look at their values, what are their goals, what have they achieved in the past, what are they currently working on. Have a good look through the website. You don't have to be on there forever, but just having a look at some of their key pieces. They'll usually have a sort of latest news section as well, which is a really good way of just sort of catching up on what they've been up to in sort of recent months. Also, one of the questions that we ask, which is potentially a little bit mean, is we occasionally ask, what's the most interesting thing, or what excites you the most about our organisation? And that's a really good question to ask people, because one, you can instantly tell whether they don't know anything about you or not. But two, you get an idea of what people are interested in about the organisation, whether, for our charity, are they interested in vaccines? Are they interested in fundraising? Is it the global stuff we're doing? So it just gives you a little bit more of an insight into the person. So make sure that you have a read up, and if there's anything that stands out to you, you'll be able to say that in the interview. Number two, you might be asked to prepare a task, and just make sure that if you do have to prepare something, that it's done to a professional standard. So this also might seem very obvious, but I've had tasks before where I've asked someone to prepare a fundraising plan, and the fundraising plan I'm given is like a little mind map that's drawn in pen on lined paper that's been ripped out of a notepad, which I know the person's done on the train on the way here. That gives me an impression of that person that's not that positive. And so I would suggest that you always, do everything, make sure that it's done on the computer, make sure that it's printed, make sure that, you maybe have an extra copy just in case. But, for example, this woman here, she looks very professional, but her piece of paper has literally nothing on it. Make sure that what you're providing would be a good standard of work that your employer would be happy to see. You might also be asked to do a presentation. So make sure that you prepare this. Like, I've had people who've come, they've had no slides, which is fine. If that's your style, fair enough. But then they've read some notes that they've, again, obviously written on the train on the way here. If you're asked to do a task, it's because that's going to be a key a key skill that you need to have, exactly, especially within presenting. So make sure that you come, that you don't, if you can do it without notes, I definitely say that that's a positive. And for me, having a presentation is really useful because that is your notes. You can look on here and you've got some bullet points, you go, oh yeah, that's my next point. So make sure that you always do those tasks to a professional standard, because you're showing what you would do if you were there. 3, follow them on social media and interact with their posts. So it's also a good way of keeping up to date on what the latest thing they've been doing is, because not all companies update their website regularly. But 2, if you're interacting with their posts, giving things a little like, it very sort of subtly says that you're interested in their company and that you're following what they're doing. So that's a good one to do. Number 4, dress to impress. So always come dressed to an interview, dress smartly. This also sounds really silly, but I have had quite a lot of people turn up to interviews in trainers or in jeans or, in a dungaree dress. And that to me says that, oh, this interview's, you're just sort of fitting us in around your day, rather than you've come here presenting the best you possible. Whether it's for a bar job, interview a big corporate, an interview a charity, it doesn't matter how the people dress day to day, you always go to an interview dressed properly and smartly. Number 5, reread the job description. So this is a really useful one that I wish I had known when I was applying for jobs, is on the train over, just have a quick look back through that job description, look at those key skills, and look at the responsibilities, because you're more than likely going to be able to pull up some of those skills during interview questions if you've just had a look at them. Also, you might be asked, what's the thing you're most excited about in this role? What's the thing that you might need a bit more training or support on? And if you can't remember what the job is because you applied for it a month ago and you haven't looked at it since, that's not going to be very positive. And 6, again, really obvious, just be early, go and sit in a coffee shop across the road. And if you can't, if the train is late or anything like that, just make sure that you notify the company. We've had lots of people turn up for an interview half an hour late, they've not said anything. It doesn't give a good impression, but also it might be that the interviewers are no longer available. Had they known, they could have shuffled things round, but they might not be able to now, and so you're now stuck with no interview and you've made the journey. And then finally, these are my interviews these are my tips for within the interview. Breathe. Number 1, please breathe. I've seen people have sort of been holding their breath and almost blue because they're so nervous. Just breathe, take a deep breath, that's absolutely fine. Feel free to sort of center yourself and gather yourself. Number 2, always take the water. So they will offer water, bring a bottle in your bag if you want to. Just make sure that you have water accessible. It's really useful because if you're nervous, you'll get a bit of dry mouth. But 2, if you have that water and you need to have a little bit of a think about the next thing that you're going to say, you can have a drink, put it back down, and although that's probably only about 5-6 seconds, it actually gives you a huge amount of time to think about your next answer, to maybe gather yourself if you're nervous. So always take it, even if you don't need it, it's just there and available. 3, so think about the answers that you're getting. Sounds silly, but it's fine. If I ask someone a question in an interview, if they take a minute or 30 seconds or 10 seconds to respond, I know that they're considering what their answer is. If someone instantly blurts it out, it might be a great answer, or it could be waffle and they could just be talking because they don't want to leave the silence. So just have a think about it, maybe take the drink if you need to. If the question has several parts, so sometimes the question will have, oh, what would you do about this, this, or this? Feel free to ask them to repeat the question. Answer one part of it and then say, oh, and what was the other part of the question? There's no need for you to ramble if you can't quite remember the question. Just ask. Interviewers are more than happy to respond. Number 4, if you can drop in values or key skills from the job description, then do, because that's really useful. We know that you've read the job description, you've been on the website. All those kind of things will really make you stand out from the crowd. You're not just another person who's got the skills to interview. You're somebody who really cares and they know their job. And to be honest, if you've got a few interviews, this shouldn't take long for you to do that. You can look at it on the way to the interview. 5, don't waffle through the silence. I think I've probably already mentioned that. But just because there's silence doesn't mean that you have to fill it. So as an interviewer, when you're talking, I'll be writing down what you've said. And so when you finish, I'll probably still be writing. So you can just sort of wait until they finish writing, and then they'll probably ask you another question. You don't need to continually fill the silence. Sometimes it kind of derails from the good point you've made into something else, and then I'm completely lost. So feel free to stop when you feel that you've answered the question properly. And then finally, number 6, expand when asked. So it might be that you think you've answered the question. Great, I'm going to stop there, give them their time to write down the answers. And they might respond with a follow-up question. So let's say the question is, have you got any, fundraising experience? And you go, oh yeah, like I actually, I signed up for Everest Base Camp and I did a load of fundraising for it and I hit my target and I went on the trip and it was amazing. Full stop. I'm, as the interviewer, might go, and what kind of fundraising did you do? They might give you a sort of leading question as to tell me a little bit more about this particular aspect. That's when you go, oh well, I actually, I put on a quiz night, I sold old items, I did this, I did that, and that's when you expand. So it might be that, as an interviewer, sometimes someone will hint at something and like, oh, I want to know more about that. So I'll ask a follow-up question and then they completely miss that I'm sort of giving them a bone. So if someone asks you to expand, then please definitely do, because that will give you a really good idea as to what information they want to hear. And then my final tip that isn't actually on the slides is that when you get to the interview stage for me as an employer is I've looked at the applications. These are the people who on paper could do the job. Now what I'm looking for in the interview is somebody who's going to fit into my team and fit into this organization and will be able to excel at the job. So if you get to an interview, it's because you can do the job. If you get the job, it's because you're the best fit for that organization. Now, I know it can be really disappointing if you go for a role that you really want and you don't get it, but it might be that you might not have fitted with that particular team, and you probably wouldn't have wanted to work in it anyway if you had got the job. So don't take it as a detriment against you. It's just that you weren't quite the right person for that place, and the right job will come up for you. Fab. I will take some questions before the coffee shop.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jenny. We've had a few questions come in. So the first one, which has come in from Rachel Lynch, is what is the best or worst or really strange interview question someone has ever asked you, and how is best to answer this?
Oh,
I've got one if you want a bit of time to think
go on. I want to hear yours.
I saw this and I had one that has come up recently. So the one that I thought was really good and threw me recently actually was I was asked what book had I read recently and why would I recommend it? And it really threw me because I'd done all my research in the organisation. I'd kind of gone through the stages, and then they're asking me a really not really personal question, but a more personal question. But obviously it was obviously a question focused around kind of ability to communicate and influence people, and also just getting a feel for you as a person. It was just really threw me, but I thought it was a really good question to throw in there in hindsight to get a feel for someone's character.
Yeah, that, to be fair, that's really good. I was going to say something along the lines, I think it was like, what's the best gig you've ever been to and would you recommend it? It's along those kind of lines, which I think, one, it's meant to throw you, so don't panic. The whole point is that they know that you can't prep for that question, and so they actually want to, I'm giving you all the answers, being like, prep for all these things because they'll ask you, but they do actually want to know what you're going to be like when you're thrown off. So feel free, just take a minute and have a think about it, but it will usually be a little bit about wanting to just get to know you as a person better, and again about communicating how could you put this idea forward. So yeah, I would say take a minute, and it's fine to be a little bit, smiley and jokey and those kind of more personal questions as well.
Fantastic. The next question we've had come in is, what should I do if I find a question from an application form or an interview difficult to answer? I guess what were the steps that you go through if it's not completely obvious to you what you want to be done?
So potentially I'd ask friends and family, what do you think? Just if it was really easy, if there's someone else in the room, what do you think this means? The other thing is it's fine to actually, either call or email the person at the organisation. So on any time we put out an application, it says, if you've got any questions, please email, and it'll usually be my email or whoever's interviewing. It's fine to email them and say, what exactly are you looking for from this question, to get some more information, because the last thing you want to do is interpret it in one way and the interviewer going, well, they've completely missed the mark on this one. Just ask the organisation. That's why the contact details are there available.
That is perfect, because that leads us wonderfully into our next question from Simon Varley, of all people. He's asked, "Hi Jenny, did you find it positive when a candidate contacted you or the hiring manager or the future manager in advance of submitting their application for an informal chat about the role?"
Yeah, it shows you, one, that someone's obviously very keen. I think it's only useful if the person actually has some genuine questions. So it's great to ring up and be like, oh, I'm really keen, I want the job, but have some actual questions ready, because if not, I can tell you a bit about the role and go, okay, do you have any more questions? And then you're sort of like, no, not really. So have some more questions about what the actual role entails. So, like a great one is, what does a typical day for this role look like? That's a really good example one to ask, because you wouldn't know that from looking at the job pack. Also, if you're going to ask them some questions, please don't ask anything that's already in the job pack. That's really frustrating as someone who's looking at this. If it says, like, these are the hours, this is the holiday that's allowed, or please submit your application to this email address, and you submit it to me, that in me instantly I'm going, oh, they've not got attention to detail because they've not even bothered reading the application properly. So if you're going to call up, I think it can be positive as long as you've got some really good questions that you couldn't find the answers out to otherwise.
Perfect. And I think that links back to the question earlier about the not getting feedback from organisation. I do think sometimes if you can make that connection before the interview and ask those questions, and that always increases your chance of getting feedback afterwards because you've stood out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And the final question, if anyone wants to submit any more, please do so ASAP. But we've got one more that's come in from India, and she's asked, do you have any general tips for giving a presentation during an interview?
Yes. So if my ideal presentation would be one that you have prepared, what you're saying. I would prefer if someone didn't use notes. So having like an actual presentation like this one that's got bullet points will help you as the presenter to know where you're going with the story without it having to be, on cards in front of you. Also, the cards can be quite distracting because you're like, where's my place? Where's my place? Give us a bit of eye contact, have a look at us. Make sure that your presentation has few words. So in my presentation there were no big paragraphs apart from the examples I wanted to show. Everything was usually a little bullet point, and it was me expanding on that, because if I'm being presented to, I want to look at the presenter, not the slide. The slide gives you some nice focal point, but it's not meant to be telling you the information. You as the person are. And anything that you can do a little bit differently, if you can make it a little bit more interactive. It can be a bit strange just interacting with two people sat across the desk, but I appreciate when somebody does have a little bit of audience participation, or is nice and smiley, or there might be a few jokes in there. It's a bit more personal than just someone sort of standing with some cards shaking. It's good to sort of loosen up and feel free to use your hands. I use my hands all the time, but if not, I would just look like this the whole time through the presentation, and it makes you, the viewer, quite uncomfortable. So those would be my top tips.
Fantastic. Thank you. They are all the questions that we've had come in. So thank you very much for anyone submit them. I said some really good questions there. So I hope Jenny's managed to cover them for you. As said, we'll be carrying on the conversation in the coffee shop. I'm not sure what room we're in, which isn't very helpful, but we'll pop it in the chat below. There we go. Jamie's put it, table 1 in the coffee shop. So if anyone wants to carry on the conversation, head over there. Jenny may need to nip off a bit early, but I will go over there as well, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions. Or as Jenny's said kindly, you'll be able to get in touch with her if she needs. She'll be able to help you with any kind of questions around this moving forwards.
So if anybody does want to contact me, you can email me at fundraising@meningitis.org. Like, please feel free to drop me an email. Hopefully this has been useful. I hope that I haven't just been teaching everyone how to suck eggs. But yeah, fundraising@meningitis.org. Feel free to drop me an email. It might take me a little while to get back to you with the current situation, but I will take the time to give people a little bit of, help and some advice if you need it.
You've had lots of very complimentary comments in the chat, Jenny, so I think it's been very useful for people. But yeah, just want to say a final thank you to you, Jenny, for presenting the session. It's been really useful, and I hope everyone else has found it the same as well. So yeah, we'll see you over in the coffee shop in a few minutes.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.